Hello everyone, and welcome to Creative Cake Design. I'm Rachael Teufel, and I am super excited about today's live. It is jam-packed full of information. Everything from recipes for the cake to decorations to make this just absolutely gorgeous cake. It's of course in my favorite color, a really light purple, although the inside of the cake is pink, and because of the pink champagne that we're using, of course it's got just a little light and airy feel to this cake. It's just perfect. So why don't we talk just a bit about where you can find the recipes for your champagne cake and your blackberry filling. First, you can find a link in the description down below, and you can also head over to our new TikTok channel. And on TikTok, you will actually find a video of me making the cake as well as making the blackberry filling. So I know that oftentimes, especially creative people, we are visual people, and so I thought it would be really great for you to be able to see the recipes being made, not just get the written descriptions. So I encourage you to hop over, check out TikTok, see the recipes, put into action, and if you have questions either throughout this particular live event, or if you have questions over on TikTok about the recipe, feel free to pop them in the comment section and we'll be sure to get back to you. Of course, throughout the live, I'm going to be checking in and seeing if we have any questions that need to be answered. So I encourage you to interact with me as much as you can over the next hour and get those answers that you need in order to be successful on your cake journey. So let's get started with some really fun decor. I am going to share with you a little story real quick because frankly, wafer paper was my nemesis yesterday and even the day before as I was trying to prep here in Minnesota. It is bitter cold, it is super dry, and I literally had wafer paper just cracking in half with little to no effort. So I have learned a lot about wafer paper in the last day just in regards to how it's going to respond in a super dry environment. And so I'm going to share some information with you that I have, of course, I've known what needs to happen to wafer paper, but actually putting into practice sometimes can be a bit of a challenge. So let's talk about wafer paper for just a second. It is basically made from either a rice or a potato starch material. It's laid out, dried, pressed, and we get this beautiful paper that essentially is edible. And it responds a lot like regular paper. So that's the beauty of this particular product, is that you really can do anything with it that you would normally do with regular paper, but it's edible, which is kind of cool because it allows us to create all sorts of different decor on our cakes that are just a little bit more unique and different and maybe not so traditional in the cake world itself. So wafer paper really should be flexible. And as you can see, as I am bending this, it is just snapping in half. So one of the things that I have done is I always do this. I keep it inside of a box, and it actually has a wet sponge inside of a Ziploc. So let me open this up and just give you a quick peek. This is just a fresh sponge. It's placed inside of a Ziploc bag. It's got water on it, distilled, so that we don't add any particles to cause this to mold or anything like that. And these can stay as long as you've used a fresh sponge, a fresh bag, and distilled water. This will last for years, to be honest, as long as it's not opened and has anything foreign introduced to it. So just be careful when you're first making this, but you literally just set it in the box with your wafer paper, close the box, and in any normal environment, this works really well. It keeps the wafer paper nice and moist, and it just keeps it hydrated so that it's flexible and we can use it within our projects. Now, here in Minnesota, it is freezing cold. It is super dry. My hair is staticky. It is just wild. I've never quite experienced anything this dry before. So I've had lots of fun and lots of frustration over the last couple of days. But what I want to share with you is a couple of ways to be able to hydrate this if you're struggling in a dry environment, or just in a situation where we're in right now across the northern U.S. where we're just bitter cold in a lot of places that aren't normally quite this cold. So be sure that you hydrate this. If you really need to add a lot of moisture quickly in order to get this moving, a little bit of steam will work. I also have a facial mister that I can actually just, if I do it the right way, I can just mist over top of this ever so lightly, and it'll start to curl up and just get a little bit of humidity within the paper, and then just set it aside for a moment, and then it will actually start to absorb all of that moisture and really be more flexible, and it's not going to break on us the same way. So while this is a technique that I have used in the past to get it moving and twisting and turning and doing what I need it to do, this is a technique that you can use to actually really hydrate it in order to get it bending and doing what you need to do. So this now is going to bend a whole lot easier. It's not going to snap the way that this one was snapping earlier. So just a little trick for you there. And then when you are getting ready to use your wafer paper, you can certainly keep it white. I think white makes a beautiful decor using wafer paper, depending upon what style you're going with. But it also has a really great way to take on texture and a little bit of color. So the back side is textured, the front side is smooth, and in this project I actually put color on both sides, but I was a little haphazard in how I was placing my color. So normally I would start off the paper and move on, so I have a more uniform look. But in this case, with making vines and leaves like this, I actually wanted it to be a little mottled. You know, you want that color to just be unique and different everywhere. You don't need it to be the same across the entire paper. So feel free to just get it on there anyway. Using a large brush is going to make it go a little faster. Oftentimes you can grab just a big fluffy makeup brush and get it on there, but any type of brush will work, does the job. And then again, on the textured side, you can see the color grabs on just a little bit more. It's a little darker usually on the textured side, and that's because that dust just really like sets into the little holes within the texture that's there. So don't be afraid to just put a lot on, and then you can dust it back off just like that. Set this aside so you can use it again when you're ready. And now when I'm working with wafer paper, I have a tendency to color all my pages quickly, set them back in the box so that they don't get dry, and then I will pull them out individually as I use them. So just be sure that you are, keeping things put back if you can, just to make sure that everything stays humid. You really want humidity when you're working with wafer paper. Not too much, because too much is bad too. So let's see. I'm going to be checking questions, so if you have any, by all means go and check this out. Helena has a question just about high altitude baking, and I promise you I will get to it. We're going to get through our decor, and then as we move to the cake, we're going to talk about all those recipes. So for utilizing any kind of paper punch, you have a couple of different styles. You have an individual punch that will do a shape. In this case, this is called a continuous punch, which just simply means that the more that you use this particular punch, you can keep lining it back up, sliding it down, and getting the next one lined up. Now I gotta find the right one. There it is. So it's usually the same width. You can come just past this, but this just allows you to make a really long vine versus really short vine. And it's your choice as to how long of a vine you want. My best recommendation to you is to try to make the longest vine that you can. And if it happens to break, which does happen, and happened, I can't even count how many pieces of wafer paper I went through just to get a handful of good ones. But just try to make the longest one that you can, and then you can break them and make them shorter if you want to. And that just makes your process a little bit easier. You're also going to find that occasionally these will just break on their own. And so don't think that you can't use that. You certainly can. As you're shaping and forming these, which we'll get to in a moment, we're going to be twisting them, and occasionally you have just a spot that's a little weaker and they break. So then you have two vines instead of one. So let me just do a couple here. Again, there's a shiny side and a rough side, and what I have found with the punches is that the smooth side actually punches better. So I am definitely putting the smooth side up, and it just allows it to slide past all of those blades that are on the inside without getting caught. So that is one more just little trick that I highly recommend. And so you can tell every once in a while they're getting caught. And it's totally fine if you get a little leaf that's breaking off and it ends up, going somewhere else. It's okay. This particular style is not a perfect style. It's very organic, and it's just okay if you lose a leaf here and there. It makes it look more natural, in my opinion. Now, all of these flowers that we're making today are a little bit more on the fantasy side, but I really feel like these the little vines almost look like vines that we would have in our floral world. But they also remind me when they start curling up, and I'll show you one that gets overhydrated, but they almost start to look a little bit like baby's breath, just in the fact that they have lots of little buds rather than larger buds. So just something to keep in mind as you're working with different styles of paper punches. It's kind of a really neat situation where we can control a little bit how all of these pieces work together and what happens to them. Okay, so let's see. We have in front of us, this is a foam core board, nothing fancy. You could use a regular cake board as well. You just want something that has a smooth top to it. So even something like a plastic cake board would work really well. And that's just to prevent all of your little pieces to totally stick to the board itself. You also need some straight pins. And then this is probably going to shock a lot of people who know lots of information about wafer paper. It is very rare that we want to get wafer paper sopping wet. When you get them super wet, I'll do just a scrap piece over here to be able to show you. But when we spray these a lot, this wafer paper actually starts to disintegrate and just dissolves on you. So be careful that you don't want sopping wet wafer paper. This is not going to work. It's not going to hold its shape. But we usually don't put a lot of water on our decor because it just disintegrates. In this case, we're actually going to use more water than I ever thought I'd have to use. At home in Colorado, I would just do one squirt on one side and be done. And here in Minnesota, I've had to use sometimes at least 2, sometimes 3 misting squirts onto my wafer paper. So my suggestion to you is try a couple and see how it works. So first try one. So I'm going to squirt off camera for a second just to get any larger droplets. And then 1, 2. That is what I have been doing here in Minnesota, and it has worked really well. So you want to make sure this is on your misting setting, not a stream, not large droplets. But I'm going to show you what starts to happen. When you get wafer paper wet, it wants to start curling and changing its shape. So you can already see down at the bottom, we've gone from perfectly straight to something that is really starting to curve at the bottom. Our leaves on the side are starting to curve forward a little bit. That's what we want it to do. We don't want it to be so wet that it disintegrates, but we also don't want it to be so dry that it doesn't curl and do anything. So taking my dry side, I'm going to set that down, place one pin at the top, and I have a tendency to leave these little tabs. If they stay solid, it's really nice just to be able to pick up the tab and not feel like you're going to break any of your petals. And then twist up in the air. And when you're happy with your twist, go ahead and pin it again. And then this is going to just sit and dry for a matter of a few minutes. It's definitely not going to take very long here. Depending upon how humid the location is that you're working in, you may need to leave these a little longer, but it's such a small amount of water and it's such a small piece of wafer paper that it really should start to dry very quickly. So let me grab this second piece. So if it happens to break, don't worry about it. Now you're going to have a longer piece and a shorter piece. Works the same way. No big deal. And I'm going to go ahead and set this one down. And I have a tendency just to use my needle to, pick it up and twist and turn so that I'm not handling it too much and causing it to break. And I'm going to twist this one a little bit more than the first one we did, just so you can see some variety. One of the things you don't want to do is spray right onto the board because it will actually be too heavy and it'll cause it to literally just sink down to the board and it gets caught. So just make sure that you're spraying away from yourself. So wafer paper is one of those things that is becoming readily available in a lot of your craft stores. So I would take a peek at craft stores, and then if you're struggling to find it locally, you can most certainly find it online. There are a lot of places to purchase it. It's one of those items that's readily available in almost all of your specialty cake shop supply stores. But like I said, some of our local craft stores are really starting to up their game in the way of what type of cake decor items they're carrying in store. You can actually find sugar sheets now. You can find modeling chocolate in store, which is like unheard of. I have been in this industry for over 20 years now, and it is literally just within the last maybe year that modeling chocolate has hit the shelves in our local stores. So that's super exciting because we certainly, the ones that have been in this industry for so long were just like mind blown that you can actually get it at a local store now and not have to order it online or go to a specialty shop or order even from the supplier directly. I mean, it's just become far more convenient, which is just absolutely wonderful. So these are just going to sit aside for a few minutes. One of the questions that we have from Natalie is how long will your wafer paper actually last? So if you put it inside of a container like this and put it with your moisturizer, which is the wet sponge, it will actually stay for years and years and years. Wafer paper is not something that goes bad. There's nothing in it unless it gets wet. There's nothing in it that could potentially mold or go bad. So I actually buy in bulk. I don't use wafer paper on a daily basis, but I usually just buy it in bulk because it's cheaper. I throw it in one of my bins, set it in my big pantry with all of my cake supplies, and I just pull it out as I need it. So there's no worry about buying a larger pack and setting it aside. It's super convenient to have on hand. The other thing to know about wafer paper is it comes in colors and it comes printed with decor on it. So if you're looking for something that's a little bit more jazzed up than just a white piece of paper, you can actually find them printed with like floral patterns and stripe patterns and all sorts of things. So it's kind of a fun medium that we can play with and just really have a lot of creativity with it. So once these dry, this is what it will start to look like. See, they're very fragile, so you have to be careful, but this is just a curled, dried vine, and it's just absolutely perfect for the style of decor that we're going to be creating today. I recommend that when you're finished letting them dry, go ahead and trim off this top piece, just so now you have a complete vine. You could also look at the other end. If you want to take the time to cut off some of the excess that has broken, you could certainly do that, especially if you were going to hang this from the edge of a cake, for instance. So maybe you had a cake on a stand and you had a nice cascade of vine coming down and you really wanted to let this hang off the edge. This is perfect for that. The options are endless in the way of design and what you can do with hanging things with this style of decor. So don't stress over them breaking. You'll just end up with some smaller pieces, which actually, it actually works out really well when you're adding them to certain places on the cake and you just need a little something and not a whole lot. I'm actually going to show you this one, which we just did. And I really like it because it had a little bit more water than this first one. So you can see it literally has just curled up on itself. So rather than being able to see all of the individual vine work that's here on this particular cutter, it really has just curled up so nicely. It just has this really unique look that, gosh, if we tried to make this out of gum paste, it would be so much time and so much work, and I just don't know that it would be worth making out of any other medium. So I am just fascinated by making these little vines and leaves because the options for decor are just, to me, gives us so many more ways to decorate. So let's go ahead and set that aside for the moment. The wafer paper, I'm gonna leave these out and just hope and pray that they're not too dry when we're ready to go and put them on the cake. But don't worry, I have lots of extras set aside. I am just gonna clean up this area just a little bit. Let's check and see if we've got any more questions. All right, I think we're doing well. So the next process that we're going to talk about is making these tiny little succulents. And this was just sort of a fun addition to the vine work that's here. I've done some that are not on the wire, so if you want to just place them on the cake, you certainly can. If you are looking for something that's going to add a little bit of height and depth to your piece, then I do highly recommend putting them on wires. Let me just move this out of our way. We're doing too many things. Just kidding. I love sharing. I love being able to share everything that I have learned across, almost 21 years of being in the sugar world. So I think it's important to share, and if you guys have different ways that you might use this wafer paper, share them, show us, let's see what you got. Post it on our Instagram or Facebook, put it in the comments on YouTube, whatever it is that you need to do, and just to be able to share with everybody else too. I just think that that's the best part of our industry, is that we get to experiment and try new things and see how it works and then share it with everybody else. And that's how we all get to learn and grow and be better at what we do. So, okay, so what I have here for the little succulent flowers, this is just a little bit of gum paste, and I have a little powder on my hands left over from working with the wafer paper. But that's a good thing, because the powder is incorporating into my gum paste and giving it just a slightly pink purple color, which is really nice because whenever you have anything that's just stark white, it doesn't take color quite as easily as something that already has a little bit of color to it. So it just is a way to kind of enhance the look. Obviously, if you're doing a different color than what you have used for your wafer paper, by all means, wash your hands, clean your surfaces, and start with some fresh white gum paste. So what I'm doing is just kneading it, make sure it is nice and pliable. And then I'm going to just make a little bit of a cone at one end, and this just helps the gum paste get into some of those deeper locations without bunching up and getting lots of other texture in there. You always want to start with a smooth surface of your gum paste when you're using a mold, and that way you don't get any lines or wrinkles or anything like that. And I'm just going to trim a little bit away. And then I'm going to use my fingers just to make a cone on the opposite side and trim off just a little bit more. So then the one thing that I have a tendency to do when I'm making multiple flowers is I will actually do my first one and I'll trim it down to exactly what I want it to be. Make sure this fits nicely, works well. And then I actually measure how much gum paste I'm using for this particular mold. And then I can measure, multiple sections of gum paste and know that when I put this little bit of gum paste in the next time, it's going to be a perfect fit. So that's a trick you could use if you're doing multiple. It saves you a little bit of time from, trimming and trimming each time. Okay, so once your gum paste is inside your mold, you just want to push it away with your finger towards the center. So grab from one side, pull towards the middle, and that's just going to curve any of the gum paste that is sitting right on those outer edges. And it allows you not to have any excess that would take away from the shape of the mold. I've got a little candle here. Any candle will work. Pick your favorite scent, favorite color, whatever you'd like. And I'm just going to light my candle. Now, a lot of people are probably wondering why in the world is she lighting a candle when she's working with gum paste? But this is actually how I attach my gum paste pieces to my wire. So I have used all sorts of things. I have used gum glue. I have used piping gel. I have tried it all. Water. I have tried it all. And for me, it just never holds. It has a tendency to just slip right off of my wire, and it makes it a hassle, especially when you're assembling. Like if this were a center for a gum paste flower and you're adding lots of petals to it, if it falls off, you just have to start over, and that's really frustrating to me. So this is what I have found to attach my wires to my gum paste to make sure that they're not coming off. There is no way this piece is going to come off. So this is a 30 gauge wire. Sorry, this is 18 gauge wire. And all I'm going to do is use my pliers at the tip and curl it over. Just make a little loop. And then you actually want your loop to twist and sit flat. So you're basically trying to make a 90-degree angle with your loop. And then you're going to put this into the flame. And I usually count to 10 or so. If I'm just chit-chatting, I'll just take a peek and look at it rather than counting. You just want everything to char, first of all, and you want that metal to get really hot. Get a little twist, and then you're just going to set it right down. You can see the sugar bubble, and then I just give a little tap, and it actually holds it in place. So I give this just a moment to let that sugar solidify back. So it melts, it liquefies, it adheres to the wire, and then it solidifies again. And then you have this gorgeous gum paste, little flower or center, or in this case, we've got a little succulent. So this is just a silicone mold that I found online, and I love it because it makes these tiny little cute Succulents. These would be perfect for the inside of a center of like a daisy, for instance. This could work for. So I tried to find a mold that might multi-purpose for a couple of things, but this is one of my favorites. And then you can just set it aside, let it dry, and you've got instant decor for your cake. All right, what kind of questions do we have? So Jen B says, I've not really tried to decorate a cake like this before. Well, now is your chance to try. This is just, it's so much fun, and it's such a easy, organic design that nothing has to be perfect on it. So you get to play and be creative. And I think those are the best styles of designs to tackle if you haven't been able to do it before, because you get to have fun with it. There's no right or wrong answer with placement of any of these things. You can just do whatever your heart desires, which is really great. Melissa is asking if you can refrigerate a cake that has wafer paper on it. Now, my best recommendation to you is no, don't refrigerate a cake with wafer paper on it. Wafer paper, as you can see, responds to humidity. Our refrigerators are intended to have humidity in them, and so unless you have a little like a barometer in there just to know what your humidity and pressures and temperatures and all that are inside your refrigerator, you really don't know how much humidity is in there. So 2 suggestions for you. First, I always refrigerate my cakes because it keeps them firmer in order for me to travel with them. I travel all over the state of Colorado. I also fly with a lot of cakes. So for me to have a cold cake, it's really important to do that. If you are not traveling with your cake and all of your ingredients within your cake, so your cake and your filling and your buttercream, if they are what's considered shelf stable and can stay at room temperature, you can absolutely keep your cake at room temperature. This particular recipe with the blackberry curd needs to be refrigerated. You can't leave fresh blackberry preserves out on the counter like you can other types of jellies and such. It's just not that style of recipe. So if you're going to use the blackberry curd with the cake, it really needs to be refrigerated. So my suggestion is to decorate it as far as you can without using wafer paper, and then at the last minute, add your wafer paper decor. And that just allows you that extra flexibility of being able to use your cake in the refrigerator, but not with the wafer paper. The other thing that you can do is, so obviously 1 is don't refrigerate it. 2 is refrigerate it, but then add your wafer paper later. And 3 is store it in an airtight container and refrigerate it. So I use big plastic bins. I flip them upside down, and I have the lid be the base of my cake so that it can transport easily. So as long as you have an airtight container that you can put your cake into and then put that entire container into your refrigerator, then you could absolutely put your wafer paper in the refrigerator. So you can do that too. Okay, let's get started with our little, it's sort of like a succulent as well. I'm not sure I've ever seen something quite like this in nature, but I just felt like it worked really well texturally with the rest of the elements that I wanted to use on the cake. So you have 2 choices with this particular design. You can use pre-made lily stamens, which is what I highly recommend you do just because these are extremely time-consuming to make by hand. If you have time to make them by hand, you are just going to use a little bit of gum paste. It's super tiny. Roll it in your hand. So you're just going to put it into a ball first and then make just a little bit of a cone. And then I would use a thinner wire here, but I don't think I have any sitting out. So let's just use this one for a moment. If you don't have wire cutters, know that scissors work really well. And if you bend right where you just sort of creased it, it will actually break right off. So with this, you would want to use just a little bit of water. So Let me start this over because it's already firm. Make it into a ball, slide it over top, and then you're going to form your cone right there on your wire. And the trick is to twist and pull down and away at the same time. I need that little bit of water, but that's okay. There we go. And then using a Dresden tool, you're just going to crimp it and squash it back together so it has that little line. So that's literally all you're going to do to create your own. But as you can see, this is a really, it's a quick process for one, but it's not a quick process for 100. So, you know, I have a tendency to look at the project and say, is it worth my time to make these by hand, or should I just purchase them? And they're fairly inexpensive. You can find them online as well. And it just makes assembling this a whole lot faster. So you're going to take one of your 18 gauge wires. You need a little bit of floral tape. Now remember, floral tape has a sticky side and a soft, smooth side. To activate the glue, you just give a little tug on it and then you know exactly which side is sticky, which is this one. And I am starting my spin just a little lower, and I'm actually going to move it to the top of my wire. It's really hard to start your tape at the top of your wire, so just start lower and slide it up. You're going to take one of your lily stamen, set it right at the top, and spin around one time with your tape. And then you want to angle it downward, about a 45-degree angle. And then move down, what's that, maybe a ½ inch or so, and you're going to tuck in one more lily stamen. Just like that. And so you're just going to continue that process until you have created the length that you would like. So what I've done is I'm actually going to take 2 wires, so you'll need 2 of these. This length is approximately 7 inches to the last little stamen that we have. It doesn't have to be exact. You can make it as long or as short as you need to. But I'm doing 2 because I want one to go up and one to go down. And if you look at, oh boy, hang on. Sometimes talking and doing at the same time doesn't work. Okay, I've restarted and I think I'm good to go here. Once you have enough length between 2 of them, I actually put them end to end like this. So then when you look at this cake, all of the stamen are coming down and all of these stamen are pointing up. Because that's what you would normally have, you know, that flow of how a plant would grow is normally the end is where you have, you know, your first bud usually. And in this case, because I had it going up and down, I didn't want it to look like an end. So that's why I did 2 going opposite directions. And it's kind of neat when you start lining these up, it almost becomes a circle. Well, a spiral, I guess. It spirals all the way down, which is kind of a cool look. You can kind of see it happening there. You could be completely random with this as well. This is just lining up that way because of how I'm wrapping, you know, probably 3/4 of the way rather than all the way around, but just line it up however you see fit. Again, there's no right or wrong answer with everything that I'm showing you today. That's where you sort of get to add your own creativity and have your own fun. Okay, Susie, you came late. That's not allowed. Just teasing. Of course that's allowed. Susie, the wafer paper is simply cut utilizing a cutter. Looks like this. You could use any I call it a continuous cutter. You can use any paper punch that is continuous, just so that you can create longer lengths of vine. So if this were just a vine that basically looked like that, where you had a start and a stop, you could do that. It would just take a whole lot more, and you wouldn't be able to get a full curve that has something that's really long. It would just take a lot more work. So that's why I recommend this one. But use whatever you can find. I know I'm pretty sure this particular, I've had this for a long time. So that's sort of the downside of being in this industry for over 20 years. I've collected a lot of tools, and I think this one is discontinued, although I saw several on eBay. So snatch it up real quick if you know that you really want to do this one. But there are lots out there. This particular one I think is Martha Stewart, and it is unfortunately discontinued, but there are lots out there. Just grab one that looks good to you and off you go. All right, we have just one more after this. All right, so now we have our second vine, and in order to finish this particular one off, I'm actually going to use my scissors and pull away these excess threads. So you just use your scissors and cut, and they all just sort of pop off. Just don't cut your wire. This is a pretty thick wire. It would take quite a bit of cutting, although I did show you you can bend it, but we're not going to bend this one, so we're okay. Okay, so once you have that, you just want to color it. And I am just using the same color that I used for the leaves. And what you'll probably find is, depending upon your tape, for instance, this tape is going to grab onto that color because it's tacky. So it might come out a little bit darker. You can definitely pull darker colors as well. So let's throw some plum in there just for fun. Ooh, that's going to be beautiful. Okay. So you can, pick whatever color scheme you want. You don't have to use my favorite color. You can use your favorite color too. And this design really would be gorgeous in any color scheme. You could completely change up and do 3 different colors that worked well together. So you don't have to do a monotone color scheme like I've chosen, just to do kind of all lilac. You could do whatever it is that you would like. Now these petal dusts are, these are crystal colors, but any petal dust will do. And I am using, this one's plum, and then this one is lavender mist. I think both of them are in your supply list for the class. If you have any trouble finding them, they are definitely on Amazon. And you can actually find these on Bake Deco's site as well. Okay, so now we've got our 2 succulent vines created. I'm just going to close these up so I don't spill. And I'm going to use the excess color that's here just to dust. So this one's fresh. Let's not use that. Let these dry overnight at least. And I always start off the edge of the flower and come towards the center. That just prevents me from getting just a really big pile up of color on it. You can certainly, if you want more of a random shades of color, you could certainly color however you would like. But I just like that a little bit more uniform color on some of them. And then on some of them, I'm going to leave them a little lighter. And I'm literally just brushing from one side to the other. Just like that. And then if you want lighter, you can do that. Maybe a little white showing through. Not quite as dark as this one. So again, use your creativity, do whatever you prefer. You're welcome, Susie. Happy to help. And thank you, Jen B. She says that it's pretty and it looks like fun. It really is a lot of fun. This particular style is just, you know, I know I've said this a lot. You can just be so creative with it and really change up your color scheme. You can change up the style a little bit. You can do whatever your heart desires. That's like the best part about cake decorating for me is if I'm not designing for a client, of course you've got to meet their needs, but if I'm not designing for a client, I get to just design for myself or for a demonstration like this, I usually just pick some of the things that I love that are just so much fun. I tend to pick things that are a little bit more straightforward, but capable of like mixing and matching and doing all sorts of things together. So, okay, so let's bring in our real cake. Let me wipe my hands real fast. There it is. And let's talk about those recipes. So I know there was a question about high altitude baking. And I will tell you that this particular recipe is actually a high altitude recipe. It works very well at low altitude as well. That's sort of the beauty of this particular recipe. If you have any trouble with the recipe, what I would say is that if anything, for people at lower altitude, the cake might be a little bit more dense, not quite as light and airy. So if that's the case, just decrease your dry ingredients. So your flour, decrease your flour by 1/2 cup and you're good to go. Like that's how easy it is. I have a tendency to share recipes that are easy to do and anyone can do. It doesn't take a pastry degree to make this recipe. They're pretty easy and straightforward, but tasty and delicious. All right, so I'm bringing my cake in. And this particular cake is actually textured. It's really cool. I didn't texture this one. I made a really nice smooth one, but I actually just used the back of a sifter and I just kind of tapped it around and made this like really cool texture in it. I just felt like I wanted to do something slightly different than what I did on the original cake. And this is something really simple that anybody can do. It's just tapping the back of your mesh strainer and it works really well. So usually what I like to do is just kind of take a peek, see if I have a front or a back to my cake. And I'm going to make this my front. And the first thing that I'm actually going to place is going to be our little gum paste vines that we have. And I'm just going to gently use my finger to curve it. So I kind of want to look at spacing, decide how far up I might go or how far down. And that's going to kind of guide where I will place my wire itself. So I'm kind of happy with that. It doesn't curve quite as much as the other one. Maybe I'll go a little higher. And then because I know this one is going to go this way, what we need to do is actually bend this wire. We're going to bend this wire and curve it as well, just to get an idea of what that might look like. You can kind of hold it up to your cake and see like at what point do you need to insert. And I don't mind, so these are paper covered wires, so you can insert these right into the cake, no problem at all. I have a tendency to do something that's a little bit different though, because if you just stick a wire into your cake, the heaviness of this particular decor it's going to kind of flop one way or another because of the way that this wire is just like if I were to go straight across, for instance. So I like to actually bend it back. So I'm just going to bend it back slightly. And then I'm actually going to bend it again. So it almost becomes more like a fork, I guess. You know, so when I insert this into the cake, I actually have two different points that this is going to allow me. So now this isn't going to turn. It's not going to go anywhere. So that's like A little trick that I like to use because I don't want this to move once I've decided where it's going to go. Now, if you change your mind, all you have to do is angle it from here. So not from the wire that's on the inside, just the wire that's on the outside. So just a little trick. I'll show you this one here. Let's do this. I'll show you this. See how there's no way I can get that to stabilize. So, you know, for going downward, no big deal. It doesn't matter. But for going up, it really does, just because the weight of it is just too much. So that's our 2 succulent vines. And then I'm going to save the succulents themselves for later. I'm going to bring in this little bucket of vine work. There they are. Sometimes I get lost and can't find my tools. Okay, what else? So Arlene, you're asking, my recipe has vanilla pudding in it. Is that just the powder? Yes. So it is instant vanilla pudding. It's what helps keep your cake nice and moist. You can actually add a 1/4 cup of instant vanilla to any recipe, fully scratch or a cake mix base, and you will end up with a slightly more moist cake. It just adds this delicious texture that is just wonderful. And then another question is, hi from Idaho Springs, Colorado. Woo, way to go. All right. Hello to you as well. I can't wait to get back to Colorado today, although I do hear it's pretty cold like it is here in Minnesota, so I'm not excited about that. And yes, Marie, it's completely fine to stick this particular wire directly into the cake because it is paper covered already. And all you would end up doing with wire that is exposed is covering it with paper floral tape anyway. You could also dip it in chocolate. You could put a straw in there and place the wire in the straw. There's no issue with putting that wire directly into the cake. I know some people kind of freak out about that stuff or just worry that something's going to go wrong with it. And as long as it's paper covered, you're good to go. No stress over that. Okay. We are winding down. We've got about 8 minutes or so left. So if you have questions, please pop them in. Ask whatever question you need to make sure that you can be successful creating this cake on your own. I'm just trimming off my little tabs. I probably could just break them off as well. I'm in a dry place. Silly me, what was I thinking? So in order to attach the wafer paper vines, I literally am just gonna tuck and start building around my center here. And you know, the fun part is that these actually stick together. They really like to combine, and I think it's just all those little leaves just sort of grab on and they hold on. You can also use your vine to anchor some of these as well. Just know that you're gonna have some that are gonna break on you, and that's okay. We're just going to keep building and covering it up to make whatever shape it is that we would like. Now, and they can actually sit directly on the cake too. You don't have to do any special prep to a fondant cake to allow the wafer paper to hold up. It just does because there's no humidity on it. I do have a link for the vine cutter that I use. I will have to post it later because I don't have access to post it right at the moment, but I definitely have that. Oh, they just keep breaking. If you are in a dry environment, don't fret over the breakage, just keep working. If you're in a humid environment, just say thank you to the cake gods, because wafer paper is just so finicky when it comes to humidity. So one of the things that I am trying to do here with this particular cake is I'm trying to create a flow of the vine. And so there is an actual direction that these petals go in, or the little leaves. So try to stick with that, just like we did utilizing the two larger vines. You know, try to get it to go that same direction if you can, but it is not the end of the world if you just need to, you know, go a different way because it's not cooperating with you. Oh boy. So this was my other issue yesterday. Every time I put something on, something else just fell off. So lots of frustration in the studio yesterday, but we're just working through it today. And I just love the larger pieces because they make your life a whole lot easier, as long as they don't break. There we go. So really, this is just a building process. You just want to kind of hook them in wherever you can, and say a little prayer that they stay put and don't go anywhere. This particular wafer paper design that I've created for you, I really would be setting this up on delivery. So if this were for a wedding, for instance, I would be making sure that I have all my wafer paper set, ready to go. I would place my main vine, I would go ahead and deliver it, and then work from there. I would place these on site. And just as an FYI, I would also make sure that you have plenty of them. You know, they tuck in so nicely and work really well together that, you know, you can very easily get caught up just putting a million on here. Oh boy. Okay, let me turn it so I can see what I'm doing for a second. There we go. And these little leaves, they literally just hook on each other. It's so fun to, well, if they don't break, they hook on each other. And the other thing that you can do is just use the little gum paste vine to hook on as well. There we go. Just did not want to connect there. And I promise, normally when it's not negative 13, I think it was last night, something like that, these are not nearly as fragile. I mean, they're fragile in general, but I was able to just hook these and place them and do whatever I wanted with them when I was in Colorado. So even though Colorado is actually really dry, it's nothing compared to right now in Minnesota. So I will never complain about Colorado being dry again, that's for sure. Okay, so once you have all of your wafer paper set, if you're happy with it, you know, just let it go where it is. If you want more, add more. It's entirely up to you. Let me just turn this so you can see. And then the last element that you're going to add in is all of your gum paste. So oftentimes what I'll do is secure in, again, paper wrapped wire, totally fine going into your cake. I will secure some of these pieces with my gum paste and my little wires that are here. So, and you can turn them and just kind of place them however you'd like. 1, 2, 3, let's put another one over here. And you can also angle them, but if you angle them, I would just be careful that, one, if your wires are too long, don't pop out the other side, but just make sure that the wire is hidden buy either the larger succulents or even just the wafer paper itself. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Let's do that. And then you can kind of use them to tuck more of these in. Just as you go. Oh goodness. We're going back to the every time you put one on, another one falls off. All right. I should probably stop while I'm ahead because I'm afraid if I keep going here, I'm just going to get a bunch falling off and then that defeats the purpose. But this, again, it's such a fun design. It's light, it's airy, it's just gorgeous. Let's see. What else do we have? Any other questions? Jen says Colorado makes it tricky for baking because of the altitude. You are correct. That is absolutely true. However, just small adjustments in your recipes usually are enough. Don't go reworking every single thing because that then it does cause problems and you're really stuck. But yeah, so should we cut into this? Is anybody hungry? Maybe we should cut into this. Let me grab a knife. Uh-oh. There we go. So I want you to see the beautiful cake. I know you saw pictures, but this cake is just so pretty. I love the colors. I love everything about it. I'm going to make a really big slice because I didn't have breakfast. All right. It's such a beautiful cake. Just the pink champagne and that blackberry combination is just absolutely gorgeous. So I can't wait for all of you to try baking this cake, try decorating this cake, post your pictures, let us know how it went. And I really hope you've enjoyed our live today. I hope you will join our cookie decorator, Maddie, next week on Monday. She is going to be, I believe, on Craftsy. There is a link in the download or in the description there. So I hope you check that out too. She has some adorable heart cookie cutters, boxes that like actually have stuff in them. So I hope you join us again, and thank you so much for being here with Creative Cake Design.